Mark chapter 1. We're going to read a fair amount, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of break it apart. So if I can get, let's see, where do we want to start? Mark 1, 16 through 20, Shane.
Now as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew his brother casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And Jesus said unto them, Come ye after me, and I will make you to become fishers of men. And straightway they forsook their nets and followed him. And when he had gone a little further thence, he saw James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, who were also in the ship mending their nets. And straightway he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the ship with the hired servants, and went after him.
All right. Sister Kelly, could you take 21 through 28?
They went to Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and taught. They were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. In their synagogue there was a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, Leave us alone. What do you have to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. Jesus rebuked him, saying, Be silent and come out of him. When the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice, it came out of him. They were all amazed, so that they questioned among themselves, What is this? What new teaching is this? With authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. Immediately his fame spread everywhere throughout the region surrounding Galilee.
Okay. Andrew, can I get you to take 29 through 31?
And forthwith, when they were come out of the synagogue, they entered into the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick of a fever, and they tell him of her. And he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, and she ministered unto them.
All right. Bill, can I get you to take 32 through 34?
When evening came after the sun had set, they began bringing to him all who were ill and those who were demon possessed. And the whole city had gathered at the door, and he healed many who were ill with various diseases and cast out many demons. And he was not permitting the demons to speak because they knew who he was.
All right. Sister Sandy, can I get you to take 35 through 39?
Now in the morning, having risen a long while before daylight, he went out and departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him. When they found him, they said to him, Everyone is looking for you. But he said to them, Let us go into the next town, so that I may preach there also, because for this purpose I have come forth. And he was preaching in their synagogues throughout all Galilee, and casting out demons. Did you say 39?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Kendall, you got yours ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you want to take 40 through 46?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
There came out a leper to him, beseeching him, and kneeling down to him, and saying unto him, If thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. And Jesus, moved his compassion, put forth his hand, and touched him, and saith unto him, I will, be thou clean. And as soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy departed from him, and he was cleansed. And he straightly charged him, and forthwith sent him away. And he saith unto him, See thou say nothing to any man, but go thy way, shew thyself to the priest, and offer for thy cleansing those which Moses commanded, for a testimony unto them. But he went out and began to publish it much, and to blaze abroad the matter, insomuch that Jesus could no more openly enter the city, but was without in desert places, and they came to him from every quarter.
All right. Thank you, everybody. So as we looked last week, we see this tempo in the Gospel of Mark that Mark is filled with action, and as we've just read, this is just action after action after action. There's not a lot of downtime. But notice that in verse 16 through 20, that what happens with the disciples, later they'll be part of the 12, but right now they're just disciples, is the same thing that happens with Jesus. That after Jesus' baptism, it says, verse 12, immediately the Spirit drives him into the wilderness. Now we know from the Gospel of John that Peter, Andrew, James, and John had met Jesus in the southern part of the country, and now they're back in the northern part, and Jesus has gone back up north. We know that. And they've already had the encounter, and we'll see part of the encounter in this morning's sermon. But, what did they do when they were called? What does verse 18 and verse 20 say that they did when they were called? Immediately. Immediately the Spirit drives Jesus into the wilderness. Immediately they follow him. I don't know when it became popular to tell people, take your time and think about whether or not you want to follow Christ. I don't know when that became popular. If I had a time machine and I could go back and find the first person that ever started teaching that in the Lord's church, I'd probably, take the passage about Jesus making a whip, and I'd probably take it to him. He said, that's not very Christ-like attitude. Well, Jesus is the one who made the whip, not me. When you know the truth of the gospel, when are you supposed to be obedient to it? Yeah, then, immediately. And this thing of, you need to decide whether or not it's really for you, and we next Sunday or next month. Well, what if they don't have a next Sunday? What if they don't have a next month? Jesus didn't go up to him and go, hey, I see you're busy fishing. When you're done, you've tallied the week's receipts. Talk to your family and decide whether or not you really want to come after me. That is not the approach. And he said, why are you making a point of this? My question is our approach and our attitude in how we proclaim the gospel the same as what Jesus's was? Because it begs the question, if we claim that we're his disciples, yet we have a method different than his, is that a little bit of a problem? I get tired, and I got tired a long time ago of politicians who'd go, well, in Europe, let's be real clear on this. What country is this? This is the United States of America. We got a constitution that was preceded by a declaration that said we're tired of doing it the European way. So whenever someone's like, well, in Europe they got tiny cars, like really tiny cars. You say, well, we've got them in America now. I know, we imported them. In Europe, they drive on the wrong side of the road. In Europe. I don't care about Europe. We're American. There's an American way to do things. Whether that's necessarily better than anybody else's any place on the planet, overall, for the most part, till they tamper with it, it usually works pretty good. It alarms me when a politician says, Karl Marx said. Why do you want to quote the father of communism in America? Well, he has some good ideas that would help America. How did it work out for Russia? He said, what does that have to do with Jesus in this? if we are Jesus' church, if we are the church of Christ, our approach and our attitude needs to be the same as our founders. How many of you, if every time you want your right hand to hold on to a cup of milk, that it doesn't hold on to it or it always grabs a cup of tea, how long would you go before you went and got medical help to find out why your brain said one thing but your body did the other?
Well, doesn't that fall in line when it says we're a peculiar people?
That would be spot on, Brother Tommy, what the Apostle Peter by the Holy Spirit says. We are a peculiar people. We're supposed to be different from the world. And the most radically different way for his church to be different from the world is to do his things his way with his approach. You know, and I get it. Now you say, no, I have no qualms with saying to someone, you need to think real hard about whether or not you want to do this Jesus thing. Because it's a forever, eternal, binding blood covenant, and there is no way out of it. It's more solid than anything the mob ever did. It's more solid than any family connection you'll ever have on this earth. And if you back out of it, you will go to hell for all eternity. So you need to make sure you really want to get in this thing. Some of that sounds like you're trying to talk me out of it. No. What did Jesus say? Count the cost. Make sure you can finish the building. Don't start your tower, get halfway, and not be able to finish it. You know, what man is there, what king is there that gets ready to go out to war that he doesn't analyze? Can I beat 20,000 men with 10,000 men? That long before the other army ever gets there, he sends an ambassador and says, let's make peace, because he knows he can't win that war. So Jesus tells us that. Jesus tells us that. But you know, the invitation, and if you ever want, when on Sunday, and I mean this Sunday morning when I give the invitation, I will not say, you know, if you want to unite with him in his death, his burial, and his resurrection, think about it for the next month. No. I'm going to tell you what, come forward now. Come while we stand. Come while we sing. We will get it taken care of now. And it's warm-ish right now. It'll be warm by 11:15. And I can say, and the water's warm. And we have towels now. You can do it now. The call to discipleship is always a now thing. It's always a now thing. Thoughts, comments, or questions? Because we're moving on into the next section. Any other thoughts? Thank you for that reference to 1 Peter, Brother Tommy, that we are a peculiar people. Now, when we look at 21 through 28, now this one has a couple different things going on in it. But as you look at verse 24, and we've touched on this a few times over the last 5-6 weeks, what book in the Old Testament denotes the Messiah as the Holy One? So you expect us to remember 5 weeks ago? Yep. I don't expect you to remember 55 weeks ago, but within the last 5 weeks, because I know we've said it half a dozen times. What'd you say, Dawn? Did you say Isaiah? Yeah, Genesis is close to Isaiah. All through the book of Isaiah, the Holy One of Israel is a term over and over again looking forward to the time of Messiah. I point this out because when the demons that possess this man, this unclean spirit, calls him out, they know his name, Jesus of Nazareth. And that's not too big of a deal. But they also know him and call him by his name in the heavenly realm, the Holy One. And Jesus rebukes them and says, "Be quiet."
Do you want to explain that?
I do. Would you like me to?
Yes.
Okay. Since I was fixing to. Once in a while, is it good to have the testimony of your enemies? Once in a while. If your enemies support you too much, what does that do to your overall campaign and agenda? Will Jesus have to deal with the fact that demons have given him essentially praise and recognition later on?
Yes.
And what will the charge be?
You're the ruler of the demons.
Yeah, your power comes from Satan himself. The spirit that you're working with is the spirit of Satan. That's where it'll lead. Jesus, in shutting the demons down frequently, shuts them down because what has already borne witness of him in Mark chapter 1? Okay? Verses 2 and 3, we have Isaiah and Malachi bearing witness. We have two of the holy prophets. We have John bearing witness. And even those prophets bear witness of John, and they bear witness of Jesus, and John bears witness of Jesus. Who else bears witness of Jesus already? The Father and the Son, the Father and the Spirit, yeah. The Spirit descends on him in the form like a dove, right? And there's two ways to understand that. And I should have touched on it last week. But then there's a voice from heaven that says, "You are my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." So already Jesus has 5 witnesses. He's got 2 prophets, John, the Father, and the Spirit. He's got 5 witnesses. Does he need the witness of hell for his ministry?
No.
No. And so, be careful when the enemies of the kingdom are the ones who are your best advocates. Shut them down. Because the longer you let them sing your praises, the more people identify you with the very thing you're against. Okay? And so Jesus shuts it down. His teaching has power to change lives. And that's the other thing to get from this. They're astonished at what he teaches, and they're astonished also at the change that he effects. And the consequence of that is his fame immediately goes throughout that northern region, the region of Galilee. Have we emphasized the drastic nature of repentance and the need for changed life in the church like we should have?
Not enough.
if we don't look like the changed people we're supposed to be, people will look someplace else to get a feeling that replaces the actual change. This is why these churches in a box continue to pop up and lead people straight into the pit of hell all around us. Some of you, I know, are familiar with interrogation tactics. Some of you watch a lot of police shows, right? And I'll tell you how these church systems work. It's a form of hypnosis, and it's a very special form of manipulation. We walk in, and we're nice, right? You always start an interrogation nice. Hey, Rich, I understand. There's been a misunderstanding had there. We all understand misunderstandings, don't we? I get him agreeing with me. I'm not your adversary. And I take you to a little bit of a high point where we can identify even on a high point together. Then I crash you. Then I bring you up a little bit, then I crash you again. So the only thing left in the room to save you is me. And after I crash you 3 or 4 times, you'll take the lifeline I throw out. It's a form of interrogation, it's a form of hypnosis. You say, how's it a form of hypnosis? When I add music and lights and change the temperature of the room up and down to subliminally control your response and your emotions at the same time, along with the rest of the process. This is why someone can go in and they say, I was feeling down, and when they leave, they say, that's the best I've felt all week. Yep. Because you were masterfully manipulated by someone who understands human psyche and hypnosis. But because they used the Bible and they told you the emotional ride was the Holy Spirit, you leave thinking your emotions are the safe guide for your spiritual life. And this is the danger. This is the danger. And so, what we see here, and just from what you know, people were amazed at the life that was changed, but how many other people heard the same thing and left that day unchanged because they were not in the right place in their own heart to receive? And that's going to be something that we're going to see as we go through the gospel. And so they're amazed at it, and they ponder what it might be. And this is the challenge. This is the challenge. If you get so caught up in trying to understand the mechanics of why a life can be changed, instead of just saying, I want to be changed too, and taking the teaching and making it part of you, you'll miss it. You can overthink it so much that you'll never get there. I know not everybody is into sports cars here, but for those who like fast cars, I can understand everything about how Ferrari is put together and never enjoy the thrill of going 160 miles an hour. I say, I wouldn't want to do that. That's fine. I've gone faster than 160 miles an hour. I've flown in jets many times. Okay? Flying in a jet is not nearly as fun as a fast car on a good road. Yes, it is because I'm not the pilot. But have we sometimes fallen into the place that instead of enjoying the vehicle of faith that our Lord has given us, we've analyzed all the mechanics of how that faith is put together, but we've never actually turned the key and driven that faith. And I say that to us, especially many of us who grew up in the churches of Christ. We can analyze the Bible down to the finest point, but still miss out on the power for it to change our lives. And I know that in my own life, and I've known it in too many other people's lives, because too many brothers and sisters have said similar things to me over the years. Peter's mother-in-law. Thoughts, comments, or questions on the unclean spirit section?
I guess that's why Paul commanded that girl to quit following him.
Oh, yes. That, and she got on his nerves.
Yes, she did, big time.
And when someone's like, no, you shouldn't.
She was telling him.
You can rebuke a child of the devil for getting on your nerves. Because she'd followed them for days. And she was actually interfering with the ministry. And the other part of it was, well, she'd gotten on his nerves. And now she was in his head, distracting him from the kingdom. Be careful that the distractions don't get in your head. But that's a Book of Acts thing, but that's a good connection, Phyllis. Thank you. Other thoughts or comments before we move on? Okay. So, they tell him about Simon's wife's mother. And say, mother-in-law, yeah. Apparently, all of them liked her. Right?
Yes.
You know, I've known some mothers-in-law that, I don't know if someone would have told Jesus, But all of them are like, hey, she's sick. I figure she's kind of the glue that holds all of them together.
Yes.
Right? Now, there's two ways you can read this.
There is.
Verse 31.
He heals her so she could serve him more.
Okay? So, and the number of women that have said that directly or indirectly in classes over the years, Phyllis. Yeah, Jesus just wanted her healed so she could get up and get the house back in order so him and the rest of the guys could sit around. Okay, that's one idea. What I'm going to say to you is this, is as immediately as the fever left her, she was ready to get back on track with her life. She didn't do this thing of, I just came through this hard time, everything is finally leveled out, now I'm gonna, convalesce.
Yeah, I might be contagious.
I'm gonna take, as soon as she was, as immediately as the fever left her, is as immediately as she got back to serving in the kingdom.
She had things to do.
She had things to do. And it ties in with this thing of, as soon as your roadblock is removed to follow and serve, follow and serve. Follow and serve. Because the other piece of this is in another gospel. But notice the core four, Simon, Andrew, James, and John, they all four make intercession for her with him. At least those four make intercession for her. Which also tells me how close the families were of those two different fishing families and two different fishing businesses. That Peter's wife's mother is like the fulcrum, that she's the pivot point for all of them. And I'll say this on that, sisters, don't underestimate your ability to be a pivot point to bless multiple households, and your faith and your example to carry further than you ever thought possible. I mean, I might be overestimating it, but I look at this and I go, Peter's mother-in-law, she was probably a Proverbs 31 kind of lady. Okay. Now, I want to point out something, verse 32 through 34, because later on Jesus will be accused on the Sabbath. Now, this first time here in Mark, we don't see Jesus accused of healing on the Sabbath. He only heals on the Sabbath while he's in the synagogue. He doesn't heal on the Sabbath indiscriminately. When the people are assembled, when the need is there, Jesus dealt with the need, but he didn't go out manufacturing needs the rest of the Sabbath day. And I point that out because Jesus still kept the Sabbath. The need was in front of him, he dealt with it. But it's when the Sabbath is over, what? At evening when the sun had set, they brought to him all those who were sick and those who were demon-possessed. They gathered together at the door, so they're at Simon's mother-in-law's house here. And he healed many who were sick with various diseases, cast out many demons, and he did not allow the demons to speak because they knew him. When it's in front of him, he deals with it. When the Sabbath is over, then he opens it up to everyone. And so any charge that Jesus never kept the law, or that Jesus broke the law, these two right here on the Sabbath, in such close proximity, shows us how Jesus actually did things on the Sabbath, and that their charge was ridiculous.
But at sunset, the Sabbath day was over, right?
At sunset, the Sabbath was over.
So it's like Saturday night.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, Saturday evening, as first day of the week begins, the healing doors are open again. Said, but he healed on the Sabbath. He healed on the Sabbath as the opportunity was right there to be dealt with in the moment. He didn't go out looking to manufacture opportunities. Okay. So verse 35, we know Jesus has a habit of prayer. But I want you to see verse 38. Because a lot of times people talk about what was Jesus' primary mission. What does Jesus say his primary mission is in verse 38?
Preach.
To preach. It has become popular for people to say, we need something more effective than preaching. Okay. Yeah, that's always my question. What are you going to replace preaching with? Jesus preached. Now, how many of you think Jesus was an effective preacher in his own lifetime? Okay, I got some of you nodding yes, I got some of you nodding no. You know what? Both of you are right.
That's it.
When he gets to the day of the cross, how many of the tens of thousands that he'd preached to and how many of the hundreds of thousands of miracles that he'd done are at the foot of the cross and even care? On that numerical basis, was Jesus a failure in his preaching? Yes. Now bear with me. 50 days later, on Pentecost, after 3.5 years of him and the apostles sowing and watering, what's Peter able to reap? That's the conclusion of all of Jesus' preaching, and now Peter's able to make the final bridge to the risen and reigning Lord for the people. Now 3,000 people come. Was Peter an effective preacher? Well, apparently he had 3,000 people get saved in one service. Yeah, but he had 3.5 years of all of the apostles and the 70 and Jesus. And this is cautionary for all of us. Just keep preaching it. Just keep preaching it. You say, but I'm not very eloquent, brother. Well, apparently neither was Moses, yet God still used him. You say, well, I'm not like Paul. I know, that's why there's only one Paul. There's 12 of the other guys, but there's only one Paul. It doesn't mean that the 12 are better or worse. Apparently, Matthew and Judas were both good with numbers. When was the last time you thought an accountant would make a good preacher? How many of you have tried to have conversations with very many accountants? Can it get tough sometimes? All right, I got to vote for an engineer. Right? Preach. Just preach. Just preach. You say, what am I going to preach? Do you know the basics about the person of Jesus? You can tell that to someone. Brother, I don't have book, chapter, and verse reference. That's all right. Most of the people that you talk to now, they don't even have any idea where anything is located in a Bible. Times have changed. Okay? Just preach. And now the last section before Brother Dick kicks me to the curb. I want you to see something here. Jesus told the man, go your way, don't say anything to anybody, show yourself to the priest, and do what the law commands. Instead, the man goes out and with good intention tells everybody about the good work that God did, and he hinders the work of God. Because it says what? Jesus could no longer openly enter the city, but was outside in deserted places. Why? Because that man didn't do what he was told. Well-intentioned disobedience that you think serves a higher purpose than what God said for you to do in the first place hinders the church. It hurt Jesus' ministry right then, and it still does. You say, but brother, shouldn't he have given praise? No, he shouldn't have. He should have done what Jesus told him. Don't talk about it. Go to the priest and do what the Word of God tells you to do in the first place. Then you can tell people. But until you've done what I've told you to do and what the law tells you to do, don't do anything else. And people today say, I just don't agree with that. That guy didn't either, and he hurt Jesus' ministry for a while because he shut off the access of Jesus to preach.
Jesus so served people, right?
Yes, he did.
Let's not tell anybody what he did.
And it's funny to me, one of the most notable ones that he ever said, tell him, was the demon-possessed man in the Gadarenes. He says, because that dude's like, I want to follow you. And he's like, no, you stay here and tell everybody all the good stuff God did. And he's one of the few guys, Ronnie, that actually did what Jesus told him.
Yeah.
So glad to have you this morning.